Hi, welcome to the second video in our series on discernment of spirits. Again, my name is Father Brian Christopher. I'm a member of the Jesuit community, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. In the last video, we talked about discernment, and we said that discernment is about sorting through all these different movements in our hearts. Right? So all the different emotions or motivations that pull us this way and that, in order to discover which of those movements is coming from God and which is not coming from God, which is just noise, right? And we use the image at the end of the old-time radio, right, where you have to turn the tuner right away from the noise so that you can get a clear signal. And that's what discernment is. It's turning away from the noise that we have up here in our heads and here in our hearts so that we can hear really clearly. We can see just what God is trying to do, and we can hear what God is trying to say. Now, here's the question that we want to look at today. What are we supposed to listen for? How do you know, with all the different things going on inside of us, how do you know which of these movements is from God and which is just noise? How do you sort through that? St. Ignatius of Loyola was the founder of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, and he was a master of discernment. And in the 16th century, he wrote a retreat manual called the Spiritual Exercises. And in that manual, he outlined some of the key concepts and techniques for doing discernment. And he learned how to do discernment not from school or not from mentors. He learned it from his own experience. He learned it from trial and error. Ignatius was, in his younger years, raised to be a knight in the court of some local royalty in northern Spain. And when he was a young man, he dreamt of going off to win great battles and great fame and lots of money and lots of ladies. Instead, he went off to fight in a battle in a small border town with France called Pamplona. And when he was in the battle, a cannonball hit his leg and shattered all the bones in his leg. Now, the French soldiers were so impressed by his courage in that battle that they carried him back to his home at Loyola to recuperate. And Ignatius sat in bed for nearly a year. And you can imagine sitting in bed for a year, you'd be pretty bored. And he read all the books that he can. Now, in the 16th century, it wasn't like today. They didn't have a whole lot of books. And when he read through all the books in the house, there were just two left to read. One was A Life of Christ, and the other one was A Life of the Saints. So Ignatius says, okay, the only books left, I'll go ahead and read them. Well, as he read them, something inside of him began to change. So Ignatius was a dreamer. He loved to sit around and daydream and imagine his future. And as he read the romance novels that he loved, right, the stories of the great knights and great warriors, as he read that, he would dream about being one of those great warriors. And he would get really excited. His heart would start beating, and his emotions would go like this. And then after a little while, they would just trail off, and he'd be kind of depressed and bored and laying in bed again. But then he would pick up this Life of the Saints, and he'd read about St. Francis of Assisi. He'd read about St. Dominic and some of these great saints of our history, and he would start to daydream about what it would be like to live their lives. And what he found was amazing. Again, he would start getting excited about this idea of doing great things for God. And instead of seeking out great glory and honor for himself, instead working for God's glory and honor. And what would happen is he would get excited, and his heart would start beating, and his emotions would go up, and it would stay up. The emotions didn't fade. And Ignatius was smart enough and astute enough to recognize that. He felt alive. This was the beginning of his understanding of discernment. As he dreamt of doing great things for fame and fortune, he was left feeling emotionally flat and drained. And this is what eventually Ignatius came to call desolation. But as he dreamt of doing great things for Christ, he felt uplifted and he felt alive. And this is what Ignatius came to call consolation. Consolation and desolation are the basic dynamics of discernment. They are the signposts that tell you whether you're moving closer to God through your choices or whether you're moving away from God. The basic idea is this: as you're sitting there on any given day, as you consider a thought or a possibility, let's say you're trying to make a choice and you're considering two possibilities, and you consider one of those possibilities, and as you consider one of these thoughts, if that thought or possibility is going to move you closer to God, then you're going to start to experience consolation. And what does that feel like? Well, you're going to start to feel an increase of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, the fruits of the Spirit. I'm sure you learned that song when you were a kid. I'm not going to sing it for you now, as much as Ian would love to hear me sing a song. When you are in consolation, you feel your heart opening up to embrace possibility. I can't think of a better way to put it. You feel your heart opening up. You feel like your life lay open before you. But as you consider a thought or a possibility that would move you further away from God, then you're going to start to experience desolation. And what does desolation feel like? Well, desolation basically is the opposite of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. St. Ignatius put it this way, simply. He said that desolation is that experience of anxiety, discouragement, or feeling emotionally drained or depressed. And you might think of it using this metaphor. If you can imagine on a nice cool night having a campfire outside, and as you walk closer to that campfire, what do you think you're going to experience? You're going to start feeling warmer. You're going to experience more light coming from the fire, maybe smoke. And why is that? Well, because the campfire is the source of heat and light and smoke. So the closer you move to it, the more you're going to experience those things. Now, imagine that you turned your back on that campfire and you started to walk away. What do you think you would experience then? Well, you would experience the opposite of heat and light and smoke. You would experience maybe clearer air, right? It would also feel colder and it would feel darker, right? Because you're moving away from the source. And so it is with discernment. So it is with our lives. When we make choices that bring us closer to God, we're going to start experiencing things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And why? Because God is the source of those things. And as we move away, we experience the opposite. So as you listen to the voices in your heads or the feelings in your hearts, or as you listen to other people's thoughts and feelings, keep an eye on those emotional reactions inside of you. Keep an eye on what you're feeling right here in your gut. And ask yourself, are you feeling consolation? Or are you feeling desolation? Are you feeling alive? Or are you feeling kind of dead inside? Are you feeling at peace? Or are you feeling kind of disturbed and anxious? Now, there's, of course, more to say about consolation and desolation, and we'll talk about that in the next few videos. So we'll see you there.